Alright, so this is 200 rapid fire music recommendations. Let's go as fast as we can. Yes, by the way, here is both lists right at the very start, so that if you can recognize them by album title or album cover, then there you go. So let's go. Bill Wirtz, a YouTuber. Check out his jazzy stuff. James Furrow, Farside Virtual. This is early. I guess it sounds like like something that would come default prepackaged with Windows or something like what's it called, like business instrumentational music. Let's go rapid fire. Come on, Funkadelic Maggot Brain funk music. Uh, Weird Al Yankovic's Bad Hair Day. I also recommend his album Running with Scissors. Quarters by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I also recommend their albums Nonagon Infinity and Flying Microtonal Banana. Square Pusher, Hello Everything. I also recommend a few other of his albums, but this is the only one that I can recall the name of right now. Hello Everything. New York Noise. This is actually a compilation album, so it doesn't have an artist title. This is the compilation of No Wave, 1980s No Wave. The Dave Brubeck Quartet, Time Out. This is an essential jazz album. I also recommend checking out at least a track, Take 5, one of the most famous jazz songs ever made. Cannonball Adderley's Something Else. This is a more relaxing jazz record. I recommend at least the track Autumn Leaves. Tetsuya Inoue, Ambient Otaku. This is ambient IDM. Speaking of ambient IDM, Steve Roach, Structures from Silence. There's one other Steve Roach album over here. Steve Roach's Suspended Memories. This is Suspended Memories is more world music oriented, kind of tribal sounding. This is more electronic and modern sounding. Gustav Holst The Planets. This is a cinematic orchestral suite. Every single track is based off one of the planets. Minecraft soundtrack by C418. This is ambient piano music. I also recommend the sequel album Volume Beta, which is more ambient IDM influenced, and I also recommend Excursions, which is a phenomenal IDM EDM album by C418 also. C418 is a wonderful artist. Civilization 4 soundtrack. I recommend this just because of the one track Baba Yetu, a very great tribal world music vocal piece. The Wii music. Yes, the various songs from the Wii, including the Wii theme, the Wii Shop theme, etc. Wii weather music theme, etc. Very great jazzy bossa nova stuff. Symphony of the Night soundtrack. So this is Castlevania Symphony of the Night original game soundtrack. I highly recommend the track Prayer, which is the file select theme. It is Gothic infused Japanese jazz Gothic infused Japanese jazz funk rock fusion, I guess. Yeah, Japanese jazz fusion mixed with some Gothic stuff, yeah. I highly recommend the track Prayer and Requiem for the Gods. Moving on. AVGN Adventure's original soundtrack. This is just a good chiptune soundtrack for a video game. Moving on. Selected Ambient Zerks. This is actually a YouTube album. So, Selected Ambient Zerks is basically a guy took sounds of Jeremy Albertson, a streamer known as German985, and compiled various sounds of his into, I guess, Jungle D&B inspired music beats. Moving on. Nobuko's The Jolly Critters Wish You a Merry Christmas. I listen to this album every Christmas nowadays, for the last year or two now, and I think it's just a great album. Nobuko has a bunch of great jazzy albums for free on YouTube. Highly recommend checking them out. Frank Sinatra's Nothing But the Best is a compilation album of Frank Sinatra, one of the greatest singers of all time, one of the greatest 50s vocalists ever. Highly recommend the tracks My Way. Moving on, Andrew Huang, Dust and Dewdrops. Andrew Huang has a lot of great stuff. I recommend checking out his YouTube channel, where he gives advice and tutorials on how to create music. Clarence Clarity, Know Now. This is a trap and dubstep inspired EDM album. I just like the opening track mostly, Become Deaf. Artiture Amber. Artiture has 3 distinctly great albums that I can recall. Triparte, Incambala, and this, Amber. This is their most relaxed and ambient, or at least most ambient leaning of their IDM stuff, but most of their stuff is just straight up regular Electronia IDM. Portal 2 soundtrack. I love a lot of great soundtracks from Valve games. Portal 2 is a great electronic, futuristic sounding, robotic, EDM sounding, great time. I recommend stuff like Concentration Enhancing Menu Initializer. That's probably my favorite track. SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy soundtracks. So these are basically compilation albums, both from Nickelodeon, that compiled some of the best music from the 50s through the 70s of free-to-use music. SpongeBob, of course, has a more Hawaiian bent. Ren and Stimpy has a more cinematic, comedic, and jazz rock, in a weird way, orient. So I recommend checking these two out if you've probably already heard quite a bunch of stuff from them. It's just some of the best free-to-use music from those eras. Carbon-Based Lifeform World of Sleepers. This is an IDM and slightly jungle D&B influenced, slightly, album. It's mostly an ambient album. And speaking of which, Biosphere Substrata and Woob, both these albums are Arctic, chilly, cold-sounding albums, perfect for sleeping. Substrata by Biosphere. And Woob, I'd recommend at least a track, Wub, W-U-U-B, which incorporates the sounds of not only tribal ambient, but also a penguin singing. So moving on, well, or at least chopped up vocal samples of a penguin. It's not really singing, I guess. DJ Shadow, introducing. So this is a mostly instrumental Plunderphonics hip-hop album, and probably one of the best of that genre. Now, 3 albums right in a row here. Windows 96, Slower Pace, and Macro Blank. Now, really, the albums of all these artists don't really matter so much. I just recommend the artists themselves. They're mostly Plunderphonic based and create kind of edited or distorted or slowed down versions of music. And if you listen to one of their albums, then you kind of listen to them all. But easily, I would say that these 3 are the best of that genre that I know about. That is to say, taking other music and editing it or warping it and slowing it down. That is to say, you know, complete Plunderphonics as compared to Plunderphonics in the sense of chopping and warping and distorting the sounds, just kind of taking it and slowing it down is a bit different. So, of that genre, these are the best, in my opinion. That is to say, Windows 96, Slower Pace, and Macro Blank. Of that genre, those are the best. Moving on, Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. This is a 80s new wave album. I recommend the track Running Up That Hill. Speaking of 80s new wave, Men at Work, Business as Usual, I recommend the track Land Down Under. Those are the big hits. The Shags, Philosophy of the World. This is actually considered one of the worst albums ever, but it's an interesting historical piece because people like Kurt Cobain said that it was his most favorite album ever, and he would carry it around with him everywhere. But why? I mean, if you listen to it, it sounds awful with tracks like My Pal Foot Foot and the title track Philosophy of the World. The Shags' Philosophy of the World is awful, but it is still interesting and worthwhile listening to just because of how weird its story is. The parent of these daughters took a trip to a fortune teller, and the fortune teller told him that his daughters would become musicians, so he basically forced his daughters to make this album, and it's awful. Moving on, Dr. No original soundtrack. This is the James Bond soundtrack. I like the James Bond theme, and this particular one has the greatest rendition of Free Blind Mice on it ever. That's the greatest rendition of this track. Macintosh Plus, the quintessential Vaporwave album. I really just like the famous track from here, Macintosh Plus, Floral Shop. Everyone knows the famous track on here, which is a slowed down version of It's Your Move, which is the most famous Vaporwave track ever. Aside from that, it's not really an O4AV album. I'd at least recommend that one track, though, the slowed down It's Your Move by Macintosh Plus. Selected Aphex Works 64. This is the compilation of various Aphex Twin tracks remade to sound like they were made on the N64 sound font. It's a YouTube album, and you could find Selected Aphex Works N64 on YouTube. Arcade Fire Funeral. Arcade Fire Funeral is an art pop indie rock album. I recommend the track Neighborhood Free. Grateful Dead Europe 72. This is, in my opinion, Grateful Dead at their absolute peak. I also recommend their studio albums, Axomoxa, Working Man's Dead, and Shakedown Street. Very versatile, great album, a lot of great one-hit wonders. They're not really necessarily an album band, but when it comes down to it, I think that this is them at their peak still, regardless. They have a lot more great live work, too. Moving on, Ned Langen, Sea Stones. A very interesting experimental album. It sounds like you're moving through space, a lot of blips and bloops, and no real music in the traditional sense, just kind of bubbles of sound and fades in and out of random noises. Moving on, Massive Attack Blue Lines. This is kind of a mixture of R&B and a little bit of trip hop. Massive Attack also has the great album Mezzanine. I also would recommend that album. Blue Lines and Mezzanine. My favorite track from this particular album, Blue Lines, is The Wheel, the closer track. Burial, Untrue. This was made on a now defunct, or not defunct, but just really old, hard to use music creation software, and so it has a really unique sound. All the drums sound really grainy, all the vocal samples sound really, like, I guess repetitive, but its final unique sound is this very, very interesting album. Very relaxing ambient stuff, but I don't know how exactly to define it genre. Gas, Zauberberg. This is my favorite Gas album. They made quite a few interesting 2000s ambient albums, and when it comes down to it, this is exactly what it says on the tin in terms of ambient. This is, when I consider, like, alright, ambient, this is the most generic, like, alright, that's straight up ambient that I could come up with. Good album, and this is, in my opinion, their best album. Fela Kuti Zombie. This is an example of an early great Afrobeat world music album. Gotta love Fela Kuti. This is my favorite of his. Jeff Wisher, Approximately 1000 Beers, a highly experimental country influenced album, but it's really just, it's too experimental to properly describe because it has stuff like robotic vocal word samples of describing random inane stories, and mixed with like weird instrumentation and like horses neighing and stuff. So go check this out if you want to feel like you're intoxicated. This is what I recommend. Ennio Morricone, The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, one of the greatest soundtracks ever made. I at least recommend the X-Sea of Gold. Great Western, Italian-inspired orchestral stuff. Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. This is famous for the introduction soundtrack to The Exorcist, the Exorcist theme. But if you don't know, the Exorcist theme, if you continue past the 2-minute mark of the soundtrack, actually goes into a big prog rock ballad, and it's really awesome. Speaking of prog rock, Vangelis Spiral, this is kind of the line between prog rock and electronic music, early electronic music. Vangelis is great for that. Spin by Spin, I just recommend this album here to recommend where I found this album, Terminal Passage, a YouTuber that uploads like over 1,000 albums. They have over 1,000 albums to listen to, and this is just one of the many that I found from there. The Seatbelts, Cowboy Bebop. So this is the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack. Just check out the track Tank. It's just such a hard-hitting, heavy jazz track, and it's just such a bombastic, great, in-your-face jazz, just intense masterpiece. And the whole of the soundtrack is really good. Wesley Willis's Greatest Hits. So Wesley Willis is kind of an outsider artist, kind of a comedic novelty artist in a way. A lot of people dismiss his music because it is, well, pretty dismissible. It's MIDI-sounding, kind of dinky-sounding instrumentation, like free-to-use electronic pianos and stuff, and obviously fake guitar MIDI. And with his vocals singing songs about beating up Batman and singing his praises about McDonald's, I mean, yeah. But I love him nonetheless. I highly recommend the track Rock and Roll McDonald's. Moving on. Sigur Rós, Aegis Björn. This is a Norwegian or Swedish album. It's mostly, it's a lot of a cappella and singing and vocals, and mixed in with very orchestral instrumentation. So it's this, it's an ambient masterpiece in a lot of ways. Very dramatic, very emotional ride. Daniel Johnston, Hi, How Are You? I actually prefer his album, Songs of Hate, but they didn't have that on this program. Daniel Johnston records his music with really dinky, low-quality sounding recording equipment, but mixed with his own singer-songwriter and depressive lyricism, it ends up resulting in a very, very personal experience and a very, somehow, it just, I don't know, The mixture of the low quality audio and the dark lyricism combines to make it into a fascinatingly just sad experience of an artist to listen to. This is actually a placeholder album. I did not want to put in Kanye West's Donda. I wanted to put in Video Game Donkey's version of Donda. I wanted to put in Video Game Donkey, a YouTuber's version of Donda. He leaked Donda, did his own version, and that's the version I prefer. Terry Riley, A Rainbow in Curved Air, early prog rock influenced electronia, much like Vangelis. 9 Inch Nails, A Downward Spiral. This is kind of a mixture of grunge and early electronia. It's grunge but done with synthesizers instead of guitars, and it's really good. I highly recommend the track Head Like a Hole. Tool, Lateralus. I usually don't listen to metal too much, but the guitar work on here is just so fascinating, and everything in Tool sounds so pristine and tight and just spaced out as compared to most metal stuff. Like, this doesn't seem like most casual metal. It seems too, like, I don't know, prim and proper for metal. Metallica, Master of Puppets. This is my only really favorite, like, pure metal album, and I like the title track, Master of Puppets. Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Everyone knows Black Sabbath for their, tracks like Paranoid and Iron Man, stuff like that. That's what everyone knows Black Sabbath for. They also have the album Master of Reality, and those two albums I'd recommend. Moving on, Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland, one of the greatest rock albums ever made. I recommend the opening track, the opening instrumental track, the title track, Electric Ladyland, and the, of course, famous All Along the Watchtower. Exuma. Exuma has 3 good albums worth listening to. The first, Exuma, the second, Exuma 2, and the third, which I don't recall the name of. Exuma 2 is my personal favorite, and I really do love the opening track, The Obia Man. Cockatoo Twins, Heaven or Las Vegas. This was early at the start of Vaporwave, and it kind of bridges the gap between pure art pop and Vaporwave. Or sorry, not Vaporwave. I meant to say shoegaze. My apologies. Anyways, I highly recommend the closing track, Foxes in Midsummer. A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Fury. I recommend the tracks Excursions and What's the Rhyme. This is a R&B hip-hop rap album, and it is one of the greatest proto-rap albums ever. This one, Nas's Illmatic, is just pure rap. This is just pure straight-up rap, and I highly recommend the introductory track, New York State of Mind. Savon Stevens, Illinois. This is, I guess, country and folk music inspired with a dash of, like, show tunes. I don't know exactly what you'd call it from there. I highly recommend the title track, Come On Feel the Illinois, Part 1 and 2. The Microphones, The Glow, Part 2. This is indie rock. It's more slightly experimental than most indie rock, though, willing to be a bit more abrasive with overblown speaker sound effects and that sort of thing, and really, at times, loud, clustered, blaring instrumentation. Very interesting, emotional album. System of a Down, Toxicity. The only reason this album is on here is because I like the track Chop Suey. I don't listen to this sort of music otherwise. Faust, by Faust. This album sounds like if you were to take a bunch of radios and turn them on at the same time and then just have them all, like, just have random sounds going off, like, between each one. But it sounds great. Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures. This is just a really great bass and drum-centric new wave album. Oingo Boingo, Only a Lad. This is new wave mixed with ska. I highly recommend the tracks, the opener track, the title track, Only a Lad, and tracks like Perfect System, and yeah, really great ska mixed with new wave here. Probably Oingo Boingo's best work. Tyler, the Creator, Igor. Not much to say. I just kind of like it. Honestly, it's... I don't know why this one's on here. Maybe I could have put a better album there. It's alright. It's okay. It's an alright album. Eminem's The Marshall Mathers EP. Eminem has tracks like Stan. and Mom Spaghetti, and I gotta have this on there because this is Eminem's best work in my opinion. Evanescence, Fallen, and Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory. The only reason these two albums are on here is because this one has Wake Me Up Inside, and this one here has In the End and Crawling in My Skin. And I like those three tracks. London Calling by The Clash. This is just the British version of New Wave. Speaking of which, The Smiths' The Queen is Dead is also British New Wave. I highly recommend the tracks The Light That Never Goes Out. There is a Light That Never Goes Out, which is a long title for a song track, but that is my favorite track from this album. NWA, Straight Outta Compton, just one of the greatest rap albums of all time, and it has the track on it, Fuck the Police, so I gotta have it on there. Modest Mouse, The Lonesome Crowded West. This is Modest Mouse's best album. Basically, it unfortunately though does not have the track Float On, which is my favorite Modest Mouse track, but it's still the best album by Modest Mouse. Fiona Apple, When the Pawn. I still prefer Fiona Apple over her modern influences like Taylor Swift, and I think that she did what Taylor Swift is doing nowadays better with this album here, When the Pawn. So I highly recommend it. Smash Mouth, Astroland. This is on here because of All Star. All Star is on this album, that's why it's on here. Unfortunately though, it doesn't have the track Walking on the Sun, which is my second favorite Smash Mouth track. This is on here because it has the track. Alright, Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair has the track Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That's why it's on here. Aha, Hunting High and Low has the track, what's it called? Take On Me. That's why it's on here. Nina by Nina has the track 99 Luftballons on it, so that's why it's on here. Tom Waits is an interesting artist. Tom Waits' Rain Dogs, probably his best album. He is kind of considered a novelty singer in a way. He has just a really weird, deep, dark, guttural voice, and so he makes a lot of very comedic, goofy, cartoony tracks. Grant Kirkhope, Banjo-Kazooie. Grant Kirkhope made a bunch of music for Rareware, for a bunch of their games. I at least gotta recommend the track Spiral Mountain. Madness, House of Fun. This has, I believe, both their big hits on it, House of Fun, and, what's the other one? Our House, which are both have the word house in them, weirdly enough. I guess Madness only makes good music when they're writing about houses. And The Stooges, Fun House. This is just a highly competent rock album. I personally would say it's not too far behind stuff like Jimi Hendrix or even stuff like The Doors. You know, I'd put this album, like, it's a really competent rock album. What's up next? Alright, so Emerson, Lake, and Palmer, Brain Salad Surgery is kind of, to me, it's an album that blurs the line. It's right at the blurring line between prog rock and metal. If it were to go any farther, it would be Tool, Lateralus. But no, it's still in the realm of prog rock here, but it's about as hard as you can go with prog rock, and I love it. Slint, Spiderland. This is indie rock grunge with a lot of time signature changes, so math rock. I'm gonna say the best tracks from here are the opening two, Breadcrumb Trail, and Nosferatu Man. Gong, The Flying Teapot. This is just some goofy, goony, nice, and fun prog rock. Early proto-prog rock, or, well, I guess just regular old prog rock. So, The Flying Teapot by Gong. It's just a funny, goofy, I believe it's British prog rock. So, moving on, Charles Mingus, Black Saint and the Sinner's Lady. This is just a jazz essential. Same here. Sionis Monk, Solo Monk, jazz essential. Charles Parker, jam session, essential, jazz album. J Dilla, Donuts is a plunderphonic sample-based late 2000s hip-hop rap album. J Dilla died, I believe, a while after making this. I highly recommend the tracks Working on It, and I'd also recommend J Dilla's Instrumental Joints, another album of his. Instrumental Joints Volume 1. Earthbound OST. This is a video game soundtrack. I recommend the tracks On It theme. And of course, Bach and Mozart. Moving on to part 2 of 200 music recommendations. The Beatles. If I were to recommend 6 albums from the Beatles, it would be Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, this one, Magical Mystery Tour, the White Album, and Abbey Road. This is my personal favorite, however. If I were to recommend 6 albums from Pink Floyd, it would be their debut, uh, Metal, Wish You Were Here, uh, Animals, The Wall, and Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side of the Moon is my favorite, personally. St. Vincent Actor. This is art pop and 2010s pop in general, with some really great orchestral bits right at the very start with tracks like The Strangers, and I also recommend the title track, Actor Out of Work. Nirvana in Utero, one of the greatest grunge albums of all time. What else is there to say? Cosmo's Factory by Creedence Clearwater Revival. If you know Creedence Clearwater Revival, they have a bunch of great tracks like Looking Out My Back Door, and Who Will Stop the Rain, and what's the last one of theirs that I really like? Oh yeah, Bad Moon Rising. So if you know that, I mean that's some of their biggest hits, and a few of those are on here. I believe at least 2 of them. Moving on, The Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. This has tracks like 1979 and the famous Bullet with Butterfly Wings, also known as Despite All My Rage, I Am Still Just a Rat in a Cage. Yeah, so that goes on here. A really great album experience on the whole, too. The Dismemberment Plan, Emergency, and I. This is a hard to describe, interesting album. It's twangy, it's weird, it's nervous sounding rock, kind of like if instead of Radiohead being depressed, it was manic. Moving on, you got Tally Hall's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. This album here is divisive. Some people hate it, some people love it. It's show tunes and barbershop quartet stuff mixed with standard 2000s pop rock. But in my opinion, it's done really well. I think it's done great. The most famous tracks from here, by the way, would be tracks like Ruler of Everything, and I personally would recommend tracks like Good Day. Also, really quick, just to go back really quick and say, I'd recommend the opening track from here, Life of Possibilities, and a bunch of others like 8.5 minutes. Bob Marley, Exodus. This is one of the greatest reggae albums ever made. That's all that needs to be said. Stevie Wonder, Song in the Key of Life, one of the greatest R&B records ever made. That's all that needs to be said. As for Exodus, really quick, I'd just like to mention I would also recommend the tracks Free Little Birds. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I would recommend the track So What. This is an essential jazz record. Just like probably the jazz record, the most famous smooth jazz record of all time. And probably second place here is John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. I'd recommend the title track. Herbie Hancock's Headhunter is one of the greatest proto-funk albums of all time. Bridging the gap between Fela Kuti and Funkadelic, in a way. Herbie Hancock's Headhunters, I gotta recommend Watermelon Man. Let's see. Gorillaz Demon Days. I don't know exactly what I'd call this. 2000 synth pop? I don't know. Famous is the track Feel Good Inc., and I gotta recommend also stuff like Oh Green World and Dare. Daft Punk's Discovery. A lot of people don't know that there's an associated animated film that goes along with this. A full, hour-long movie, animated, going along with this movie. Or with this album, Daft Punk's Discovery. One of the greatest dance floor EDM albums ever, with tracks like Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and my personal favorite, One Last Time, and Aerodynamic. Electric Light Orchestra, Out of the Blue. This is known for tracks like Mr. Blue Sky and Turn to Stone. I also gotta say I love Electric Light Orchestra for their other tracks and other albums, like a New World Record, and famous tracks such as Strange Magic, Telephone Line, and Living Sing. So many great tracks from them. Various artists. Artificial Intelligence is a compilation album compiling a great batch of the earliest prototype IDM. It kind of set up the blueprint for IDM and early electronic in the 80s. You have everyone here from Aphex Twin to Artiture to Speedy J, and a few others. Favorite track, I gotta say, I like Musicology's Telephone. Devo, Are We Not Men? This is Devo's debut album. It unfortunately does not have their big hit Whip It. That was on their third album. This big tracks from here gotta be Jocko Homo and a great cover of Uncontrollable Urge. Great new wave, great 80s new wave. Speaking of 80s new wave, Gary Newman, The Pleasure Principle. This has the track Cars, as well as I believe Our Friends Electric, two great Gary Newman tracks. Styx, Kilroy Was Here. This was an attempted concept album, but the band gave up halfway through and released kind of a half-finished album. So the story that the album tells literally stops halfway through. It has the tracks Domo Arigato, Mr. Roboto. I also personally like tracks like Cold War and High Times. Pilot Red Sun, Achievement. Pilot Red Sun is the famous YouTube animator. He also made this great album. I highly recommend the opening track, Greetings, and the track 8 Train. King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King. King Crimson, this is the prototype, like, prog rock album. This is, like, the default prog rock album, and I highly recommend the tracks 21st Century Schizoid Man. Zero Futurism's Aphex Twin. This is an interesting album. So, this is not an Aphex Twin album. This is an album by Zero Futurism, and they made an album titled Aphex Twin on YouTube. And basically they tried to make it sound like Aphex Twin, so it's a tribute album. But all the songs are original and it's really great. I highly recommend the opening track. The Alan Parsons Project, Eye in the Sky. This is famous for the title track, Eye in the Sky, and I'd also recommend his album, I, Robot. This is a quintessential rap album. MF Doom, Food. I gotta recommend the tracks One Beer and Rap Snitch Knishes, but I also gotta recommend Mad Villainy with the track Accordion from that, another great MF Doom album. This is Biggie Smalls' Essential, probably my favorite rap album ever. Biggie Smalls, Ready to Die. This has tracks like Sings Done Change and Give Me the Loot, two tracks right at the start. Gotta recommend them. Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, highly well known nowadays. This was an experimental rap album that borderlines on just pure, like, it's hard to define what it is, but I guess it's rap. You have tracks like Wesley's Fury's opening, which is I consider actually a very abrasive song. I prefer tracks like the interludes, which I find very humorous and funny, like For Free interlude, and tracks like The Blacker the Berry, and my favorite, All Right. Radiohead's Kid A. Radiohead has 3 great albums. OK Computer, In Rainbows, and Kid A. Kid A is my personal favorite because it's the most electronic oriented. I gotta recommend tracks like Everything in Its Right Place and the title track. Swans, Soundtracks for the Blind. This is one of Swan's many great albums, but the thing about Swans is every album of theirs pretty much changes up their whole soundscape. So it always sounds different. So if you like one album of theirs, you might not like their others, or if you don't like one album of theirs, then you might enjoy a different one. If you look at tracks like Filth and Cop, some of their earliest albums, those are basically no wave, very dark and grungy stuff, and it's still always dark throughout their whole career, but always dark in different ways. Soundtracks for the Blind is cinematic, orchestral, at times bombastic, and at other times very ambient, with tracks like the opener, Red Velvet Corridor, or The Beautiful Days, or various later tracks like Surrogate Drone. It's a very weird album that sounds like a lot of cutting floor tracks compiled together. I highly recommend this if you're interested in, well, one of the scariest, most intense albums of all time. It's a 3-hour experience. I'd also highly recommend Swan's The Great Annihilator and Swan's Love of Life. Can, Future Days. This is kind of if you were to take krautrock or prog rock and mix it with Tropicana, this is what you would get. I highly recommend the title track, Future Days. New. I recommend the opening track, Hollow Gallo. This is pure krautrock. This is German prog rock. It's instrumental, and I mean, it's for the most part completely instrumental, with like maybe one sample, I think, right in the middle of a vocal. Yeah, it's a great stuff. I recommend the opening track, Hollow Gallo. Pure, great krautrock, prog rock. Lift your skinny fists like antennas to heaven by Godspeed You, Black Emperor. Very long title, but this is cinematic post-rock. It sounds like halfway between an orchestral session and a movie soundtrack and a rock album. So if you want that and you don't mind 20-minute long tracks of very long cinematic build-up, I mean, I highly recommend checking this out. I mean, it is an experience of an album. Frank Zappa's Hot Rats. So many great Frank Zappa albums. So many great Frank Zappa albums, but I'd recommend Hot Rats because it's probably the least abrasive, it's probably the most accessible, and it's also one of the most impressive, and also very relatively short. So I'd recommend Hot Rats for something that's by him very jazzy, even in comparison for what he does, and I would say relatively accessible. The opening track, Peaches and Regalia, and then Willie the Pimp are just two really great, phenomenal tracks. Moving on, Black Moth Super Rainbow, Dandelion Gum. This kind of set up some of the early prototypes of lo-fi, but it's really not lo-fi itself. It's synth pop in a way. It has a weird bit crush effect on a lot of the drums throughout it, giving it this kind of, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's like, it feels nostalgic for me in a way. So I recommend the opening track, Forever Heavy. Hiroshi Yoshimura, Green. This guy is one of the greatest random YouTube recommendations you can get. This is an ambient album, Japanese ambient album, utilizing a lot of nature sounds. Highly recommend checking it out. Resident Evil 4 soundtrack. Yes, I'm going to say it. You have tracks like Serenity, the Merchant Theme, that is to say, the Merchant Theme, and the Typewriter Theme. So, between those two tracks alone, this should get on there. I would also recommend tracks like Stranger Pastures and a few others. It's actually a very interesting, to listen to soundtrack. Speaking of which, Undertale soundtrack, over 100 tracks of chiptune greatness. Toby Fox is a genius. Toby Fox's Undertale OST is beautiful, one of the greatest chiptune soundtracks ever. Donkey Kong Country soundtrack. So the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack, specifically I would say Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country 2 for the SNES, both of these soundtracks are great, and I'd recommend tracks like Forest Interlude, Stickerbush Sympathy, and especially Aquatic Ambiance. The Orb, Adventures Beyond the Ultra World. This is, I would guess, ambient IDM with some down-tempo stuff going on here. I'd recommend the opening track, Little Fluffy Clouds. Steven Universe soundtrack, Volume 1. Yeah, Steven Universe has a lot of great music. I know, yeah. Moving on, Ben Prunty, Faster Than Light original soundtrack. Another video game soundtrack. This is ambient IDM. I know I talk about that a lot, but I'd highly recommend the track Space Cruise. LSD Dream Emulator. I'd highly recommend the track Bright Moon Cottage Ambient A. You know, that's the classic. Interestingly enough, most of the music here is randomly generated by Osamu Seitu way back when in the 90s, but it still came out really interesting project. If you can find the 69-minute condensed version of all the tracks, just compressed into that 69 minutes on YouTube, there's a version of it. The entire soundtrack compressed into 69 minutes. That's the version to listen to, because most of it just loops. The Blake Robinson Synthetic Orchestra. It's the Stanley Parable. Yes, so this is the Stanley Parable soundtrack. It's a weird experimental game, and it's a weird experimental soundtrack, so I won't get into what it is, but I recommend checking out Blake Robinson Synthetic Orchestra in general on their YouTube. Super Mario 64 soundtrack. You gotta at least check out the file select theme. Eric Sadie's Gymnopedes. I love Gymnopedes. This is one of my favorite, if not possibly my favorite, classical piano piece ever. I mean, it's right up there with stuff like, what's it called? Moonlight Sonata and whatnot. If you ask me personally, like Gymnopedes #1. Oh, it's beautiful. Starbomb. Starbomb had a trio of albums. If you don't know, they were the band of composed of Aaron Hansen and Lee Dan Avidan, and I believe their friend Ninja Brian. That is to say, the Game Grumps. And this is video game parody music. mostly chiptune inspired synth pop stuff with hints of rap elements. Good stuff though. Peter Gabriel, so Peter Gabriel really has 3 noteworthy tracks in my opinion only, and those are Steam Train. Or sorry, what was the name of it? I'm sorry, I was thinking Sledgehammer, Steam, and Big Time. Yeah, those are the 3 tracks I'd recommend by him. Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. This is, I would say, Michael Jackson's best album. Even better than Thriller. Prince 1999, I would say this is Prince's best album, even better than Let's Go Crazy. Ween's The Mollusk. This is, I think, Ween's best album. Primal Scream, Screamadelica. I'd highly recommend the tracks from this. What's it called? The opening track. Oh, fuck, what's it called? What the fuck is it called? Moving on up. Moving on up and Slip Inside This House and Don't Fight It, Feel It. The opening 3 tracks right in a row are a great trio. Interesting, weird album though. Hard to describe what its sound exactly would be. Real quick, going back to The Mollusk really quick, I'd also like to mention this is the album with Ocean Man on it, if you ever heard that track. Moving on, let's try to go a little bit faster. Dark Souls OST, love it. Weather Report, Heavy Weather / Black Market. I think I meant to put just Black Market here. I didn't know that they had a dual album. Weather Report's Black Market is a great funk album. Mouth Dreams by Neil Cicierega. This is a mash-up album. This is technically, I guess, Plunderphonics. If you never heard of Neil Cicierega, he is a musical artist and YouTuber that has been all over the place. He's done a lot of great stuff. Check him out. Bjork, Homogenetic. This is Bjork's one of their greatest albums. Probably my favorite album. This is my favorite album for it. Bjork's Homogenetic. I recommend the tracks Hunter and Alarm Call. Katamari Damacy soundtrack. This is this is beautiful, hyper energetic jazz inspired Japanese stuff. It's from a PS1 obscure game. I recommend checking it out. Pizza Tower soundtrack. I highly recommend the tracks Unexpectancy Part 1, 2, and 3, and Tropical Crust. Yeah. Vib Ribbon soundtrack. So, Vib Ribbon is another obscure PS1 game, and the soundtrack for it was, for some reason, insanely good. I mean, if you listen to the soundtrack alone, the various songs made for it, it's a whole, like, album. It really is like an album experience. And it's hard to capture whatever sort of essence they got here. I don't know why, but whenever I listen to it, it's insanely melancholy. Gotta recommend the tracks, Universal Dance, stuff like, of course, the opening track, Polaroid, and, yeah. Interestingly enough, they have nowadays gotten music videos made by the fans of pretty much all of the known tracks on here. Weezer. I talked about this album extensively in a different video. I'm never talking about it again. Brental Floss, in general, is a YouTuber that makes video game parody music soundtrack. I recommend checking him out. Ryoji Aikida, Dataplex. So Dataplex is pretty much, if you were to take random bleeps and bloops and audio clippings and like audio malfunctions of a computer and compose it into an album, this is what it would sound like, and it's great. Great with headphones especially. Smooth McGroove, that is another YouTuber that I can't help but recommend. In general, they make acapella versions of video game soundtracks. Scenery by Ryo Fukuyi. This album has mostly just free instruments in it, which is the piano, a stand-up bass, and sometimes a drum. And it is one of the best albums ever. It is seriously good instrumental jazz. Yume Nikki soundtrack. Also shout out to Yume Nikki 2 soundtrack. Two just insanely ethereal chiptune IDM ambient masterpieces, especially Yume Nikki 2. Brian Eno's Ambient 1, Music for Airports. Brian Eno makes a lot of great albums, but this is my personal favorite of his. Fight Songs by Valve Studio Orchestra. I highly recommend a specific version of this. Basically, this is the soundtrack for Team Fortress 2, but I recommend the reordered version by one of the fans that reorders this into have it all the various tracks flowing into each other. There's a version like that on YouTube that you should hopefully be able to find. Half-Life 2 soundtrack. I highly recommend the track Hazardous Environments. Fortet Rounds, a beautiful, glitchy, weird, I guess IDM album. Venetian Snares, Chocolate Wheelchair. This is the big Venetian Snares album. This is, again, just breakbeat IDM. I recommend checking it out. Whereas Fortet was very beautiful, this is more like just standard issue. Alright, we're doing IDM, we're doing breakbeat, alright, let's go. This is more like, we're going to be pretty about it with Fortet, you know. Fortet's very beautiful for a lot of their albums, but Venetian Snares is very, like, glitchy and fast. Veggie Tales, Veggie Tunes. I gotta recommend the track, Oh No, What We Gonna Do. Usig, 1977. Ambient experimental IDM. Usig usually does stuff like if you check out his other big album, Lunatic Harness. I mean, that's just kind of more standard, straight up IDM. This is just a little bit more experimental and ambient, and kind of sounds like a little bit more cutting room floor material. If that makes any sense. I love it. I love this one best. Yeah. Village People. The best of Village People. This is only on here because of tracks like Macho Man and YMCA. The Who, Tommy, if you ask me, one of the greatest rock operas of all time. It tells a full story. I recommend actually the movie version. Tommy, the movie. Yes, I love it. The Doors by The Doors. This is the debut Doors album with tracks like, I believe, Light My Fire and the title track, the closer track on it. Yeah. David Bowie's Low. I could put a lot of different David Bowie albums on here. Most people would recommend Ziggy Stardust as the starter David Bowie album, or maybe something like Station to Station or Heroes. But me personally, I love Low because it is just a little bit more, I guess, loose and experimental and, I guess, messing around. And darker in its subject matter at times with its lyricism. Pink Guy. This is, if you ever heard of Filthy Frank, this is his album. He made quite a few albums, but I still stand by this is a really great one. The Chemical Brothers, Exit Planet Dust. So, pretty much, this is some really essential big beat electronic music. If you want some dance floor stuff like Daft Punk, but instrumental, then this is where to go. John Cage. I just got to recommend John Cage. He did a variety of experimental music, essential. Siva Gunner. This is my favorite Siva Gunner project, I think, at least for right now. There's so much music from Siva Gunner. They're a YouTuber that basically, it started off as one person making video game parody and mashup songs. Like, you know, for instance, edited versions of video game songs that then the joke would be to try to pass them off as, you know, the regular song. Like, you know, this is from the OST, and then it'd be, like, different, be messed up. But the thing is, over the years of doing it, more and more people started, like, sending in their music, and it became kind of a whole cultural, big group-based thing. And so nowadays, it's like they release music on this channel, Siva Gunner, literally like multiple tracks every day. And so to this day, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of songs. And mostly it's just by a group of people. Vsauce, Saucy Sounds by Jake Chudnow. So Jake Chudnow makes the music for the famous YouTube channel Vsauce. This contains tracks like Moon Men and Moonwalking, and I Sleep with the Fan On, and many, many other tracks. This is the best of Jake Chudnow, if you ask me personally. Saucy Sounds. Kevin MacLeod, Disco Ultraloud. Kevin MacLeod released all their music for free across many years, and so his music has appeared everywhere in YouTube. A lot of people probably have listened to him, but don't know that they have. For instance, one of the famous tracks here was the recurring song on the famous YouTube channel I Hate Everything. His music is all over the place. This is not just his best work. I mean, he has so much stuff across like literally thousands of songs, and so much of it is worth checking out. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend checking out this one. I highly recommend checking out a bunch of his other stuff. Brazilian Skies by Masayoshi Takanaka. So Takanaka is a great, phenomenal Japanese artist. He has a great batch of albums, but if you ask me personally, his Brazilian Skies, that is to say his more Brazilian-influenced, more Latin rhythm-influenced album here, mixed with jazz fusion, is just, such a perfect, great song. Just a perfect, great album. And if you're going to listen to just one thing from here, I would recommend his rendition of the Star Wars theme, because it's just funny that he did that. My Bloody Valentine's Loveless. This is my favorite shoegaze album of all time. Basically, if you were to make a rock album and then layer on extreme amounts of reverb and distortion to the guitar to the point that it became the dominant sound that you can hear, that's what you would get. I love it so much. Neutral Milk Hotel in the Aeroplane Over the Sea. This is well known, and there's so much discussion on this album that I don't need to say anything about it. You can find many reviews of this nowadays. It has transcended from used to be hyper obscure, but then shot right up into extremely well known. So it's a really interesting album. White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground. Most people would recommend their debut, The Velvet Underground and Nico. I think I slightly prefer this because of the opening track. They also have a few other great albums. This is a great band. I'd also like to really quickly shout out the Moody Blues as well. But moving on, the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds. The opening track from this is Wouldn't It Be Nice If We Were Older. Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys is one of the greatest tracks of all time. Pet Sounds gets a place here. Velocity, Design, Comfort by Sweet Trip. Glitchy Japanese pop that sounds like you're tuning the radio between a bunch of different really good stations in Japan. I tell you, I gotta at least recommend the tracks Fruitcakes and Cookies and the track Velocity. Beck, Mellow Gold. This has the track Loser on it. That's why it gets on here. It also has a few other great tracks on it. But, yeah. Spiritualized, ladies and gentlemen, we are floating in space. You at least gotta listen to the opening title track on this one. That's such a good one, with headphones preferably if you can. They Might Be Giants, Flood. This is They Might Be Giants' best album in my opinion, specifically because of the track, one of my personal favorites, Birdhouse in Your Soul. Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children. Between this album and Gio Gotti, Boards of Canada has cemented themselves as one of the greatest electronic musicians of all time. Gio Gotti in particular is a horrifying, perfect for Halloween album. Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children is a perfect prototype to lo-fi, but it isn't itself really lo-fi. It hasn't been surpassed by much since, if you ask me personally. This is already on here. Well, I already had this one. This is Arcade Fire Funeral. Moving on, Fishman's Long Season. There is debate between whether the original album Long Season or the live version of the album is better. I personally like either or. I also really like Fishman's album Orange. This is just kind of one big giant long song, like 20-30 minutes I think. So, make of that as you will. Great track though. Ram by Paul McCartney. If you ask me personally, of all the solo projects by the Beatles afterwards, Paul McCartney had the best solo work outside the Beatles, with albums like Ram and Band on the Run with his Wings group. But when it comes to it, I think Ram is actually even better than Band on the Run, just slightly, although I do still recommend that album. I gotta at least recommend the tracks Uncle Albert and such. So yeah, there's a lot of great material in this album. Moving on, the Yes album. Yes has a lot of great material as well, but this particular album, the Yes album, has one particular track on it. What's it called? Oh shoot, what's it called? The one track. Oh, fuck. Is it called Your Move? I think it's called Your Move. Yeah, Your Move by Yes. That's my favorite track by them, which I, for some reason, do not recall the name of. Television, Mercury Moon. This is quintessential 80s new wave. This is the only good album by this band. I really love the opening track, See No Evil. Let's see. Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band, Trout Mask Replica. This is a very, very divisive album. Half the people say that it's garbage. In fact, 90% of people, I think, say it's garbage, and very few say it's good. I think it's actually a magnum opus. I think it's great. The opening track, Frownland, is discordant, weird, janky, um, uh, jazz rock, inspired jank. It sounds like someone threw a bunch of instruments down a stairwell, but I love it. I love it. It's because it sounds like it sounds like you threw a bunch of instruments down a stairwell, and I love it because it sounds funny and cool, and you don't get that sort of sound from much else. Moving on, Animal Collective, Merriweather Post Pavilion, one of the most interesting albums ever. Basically, if you were to take the Beach Boys and try to do similar sorts of melodies, but recreate it completely with electronia, and I mean, you'd probably get something like this album. Merriweather Post Pavilion by Animal Collective. Gotta recommend the tracks Summertime Clothes, Brother Sport, and yeah. Talking Heads, Remain in Light, my number 2 favorite album of all time. Talking Heads, Remain in Light. Talking Heads got a lot of great albums, but this one. Also, shout out to stuff like the album right before this, Fear of Music. But Remain in Light is my favorite. Remain in Light is just so great. It's so perfect. It's basically new wave mixed with funk, and if you ask me personally, even though Talking Heads is not a funk band, this ended up being one of the greatest funk albums of all time. So, yeah, gotta recommend tracks like The Great Curve, Once in a Lifetime. I mean, holy guacamole, it's all worth listening to. And lastly, and not leastly, my favorite album of all time. These weren't in order, by the way, just these last few. Aphex Twin, Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. This is my favorite album of all time. I also really love Selected Ambient Works Volume 1 and quite a few other albums by Aphex Twin. But this album here, if you're going to listen to just one album, I'd recommend this because this is, in my opinion, the greatest album ever made. With, I would say, the opening track, Cliffs, being my favorite track ever. So with that, there you go. 200 musical recommendations. I hope that you enjoy. I hope that you're able to find something that you like from this stupid list. It took me long enough to get through it. Jeez. Anyways, so yeah, I did this all in. This is actually my third take of doing this video. I mean, I tried recording it a few other times, but I mean, one time the file got corrupted. Anyways, yeah, so there. I talked for about an hour now, talking about 200 music recommendations, and probably a little bit more too, since I gave recommendations for all the music around the similar artists and that sort of thing, and other albums that the same artist did that I also recommend. So yeah, that's that, I guess. Geez. So how are you doing? I'm gonna wait until like it's 1 hour exactly, and then I'm gonna stop the video because I don't know. I'm just like that. I hope that there is someone out there that does manage to find this video and get at least a few interesting tracks from it. If not, then it'll at least serve me well for my own personal use, I guess.
Do 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 do.